The ongoing Middle East crisis is directly impacting the energy market across the world. Brent crude is hovering around $83 per barrel, and the prediction is that it could soon touch $100 per barrel. This will be a nightmare for oil importing countries, especially India. Some important developments impacting the oil prices include a statement by the US Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth. Yesterday at Pentagon briefing, he said the US war against Iran is just getting started. Let's break down the details. Meanwhile, the oil tanker traffic has plunged in the last 1 week. As per energy market intelligence firm Kepler, the oil tanker traffic has not stopped. Some tankers are still moving, but it has dropped by around 90% in the last 1 week. So let's focus on the area that we are talking about, the tanker traffic, which is down by 90%. This is as per Kepler. Sharp fall in marine traffic in the last 1 week, and the world has started to feel the impact now. So Iran has threatened attacks on ships. Some tankers are still traveling east and west. That's what Kepler suggests in terms of the movement here in the Strait of Hormuz. On the other hand, the war risk insurance for vessels in the Gulf is being cancelled. Let's play out those graphics as well. As per reports, cancellation of war risk cover will take effect from today. And this means the shipping companies, their vessels in the region will need a new insurance cover. Let's break down the details. It's going to be a nightmare for oil importers. Why? Because war risk cover has been cancelled by the marine insurers. No war risk coverage for the ships from today, from the 5th of March. Shipping firms will now need new insurance cover, and the cost of shipping oil from Gulf is set to spike because of this. War risk premium already up 1% of the value of ship. Let's also decode. Let's also tell you a little bit about how India and the rest of the world is reacting. But why is it a big concern for us in terms of how is India going to deal with the situation? What are we looking at? 37 Indian flagged ships are stranded here in this area. 1,109 sailors are stuck in the Persian Gulf. As per reports, these details are coming to fore. Pathway for this, the Strait of Hormuz, pathway for 40% of crude for India. As far as Kepler report is concerned, commercial crude oil stock with India is 100 million barrels. 100 million barrels can cover 40 to 45 days in case of short-term disruption. Amid all this, a big claim has now been made by the Iranian army. Military commander Amir Haidari has reportedly told Iranian state TV that they don't believe in closing the Strait of Hormuz. But here's what has happened so far. So Iran has been issuing warnings, and there's a counter coming in from US. Iran has issued a warning. This is what Iran says. If anyone tries to pass, Revolutionary Guards and regular Navy will set those ships ablaze. The counter to that came in from Donald Trump. Trump says US will escort tankers through Strait of Hormuz if necessary. Ships are now scared to cross. Insurers have increased the war risk premium. Donald Trump has given an assurance on that as well. As per Donald Trump, the promise that he's made is that insurance to ships are going to be at a very reasonable price. So the statements, the warnings coming in from Iran and the counter that is coming in from Donald Trump. Let me in fact go across to Dr. Carole Nakhle, CEO, Crystal Energy. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure you're updated. You know all about the situation which is unfolding in the Middle East, escalating, in fact, spreading beyond Middle East as well. Are we looking at a global crisis?
Well, definitely what is happening in the Middle East is a major, serious development that is impacting not just the region, but a global economy, global security, and not just energy markets, because there are all sorts of ramifications on the economy, on trade, on inflation, but also there is no end in sight, no near end in sight. There is the cost on personnel, not only on those who are in the military, but also people who are living there. I mean, and I'm just thinking about the Indian population in the Gulf region alone is quite massive. So there are all sorts of ramifications that we're going to face, and we're already seeing because of the developments in the Middle East. It is a crisis, it's a fully fledged energy crisis, but it's not yet the worst case scenario or Armageddon, because we are still, we just started, and something like that does not take place in 1 day or two. And so far, we can say that, yes, it's not pleasant at all, but it can get worse. And we're not there yet at the worst case, whereby more energy infrastructure gets affected. No further production can come out of the Middle East, or exports can come out of the Middle East. And actually, for me, the more worrying scenario is the GCC countries themselves, because so far they have been defending protecting their countries from incoming missiles. But at some point, if those Iranian attacks continue on the region, maybe those countries will become more involved directly in the war. And that is, for me, the really worst case scenario that we could expect to see.
So you're saying it's not worse yet, but it could turn worse. Now, given the escalation and the attack that we saw on Aramco, if that continues, if that only intensifies, what does that mean for oil importing countries? And here I'm asking about India as well.
So as you can see, even before the war started, just at the news of military buildup from the Americans in the Middle East, which was the biggest since perhaps the Gulf War, the Iraq Gulf War. So since that news started to break, you could see that prices have been rising gradually. And then just upon the news of the war starting in the Middle East, you saw prices immediately jumping. And they seem to be maintaining their upward march, though sometimes there is deceleration depending on certain news. But overall, we are not back to the levels that we had before the pre-war level. And on the contrary, it seems that the only direction that we are seeing in prices seems to be up. Now, there is always a silver lining, is that we are at levels that many feel that, they are not commensurate with the crisis. It's true, because if the same crisis would have happened 20 years ago, you would have seen prices jumping to 100, 130. And why go too far? 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, we saw prices jumping to $130 a barrel. So we're still far from that scenario, but it could happen if the war further escalates, drags further, and causes a serious disruption to production facilities and to exports. We're not there yet, but if that happens, then we should expect to see further upward pressure on prices.
Talk of the Red Sea, a route from Saudi Arabia. Don't you think that's going to further drive up the prices? And when you see that, the situation is not worse as of yet, are there any indications of a de-escalation? Because US says we're only getting started. Iran says we're not targeting all the ships. But if you try to bypass the Revolutionary Guards there or disguise, then they'll set those ships ablaze. So they've also said that we don't believe in closing the Strait of Hormuz.
They don't have to physically close it, because I don't think they can with the military buildup in the region. And also the neighboring countries are not going to just sit there and watch. So they don't have to physically go and stop the tankers. But as long as you have drones flying above your head, as long as you have bombs flying and missiles flying above your head, as long as you don't have insurance to cover you in case something happens, then that by itself causes a deceleration and maybe to a certain extent a complete halt of ships crossing through the strait, because there is a fear factor, there is a risk exposure. So how much risk are you willing to take when you don't have protection in case you become the target, whether intentionally or unintentionally, of a missile? So that's one of the questions that the tankers are facing today. Now, the Americans, we heard from the White House that the Americans are willing to provide some protection, military protection. I don't know whether they can do that for all the ships, but also they want to provide a political risk insurance that would include the war risk insurance, but we have not seen the details yet. And maybe once the picture becomes clearer, and maybe once we see more resumption of some tankers going through the strait without being attacked, that might reduce the risk, the fear factor that we are seeing today. But at the moment, I think any captain sailing a tanker ship and any company running that tanker would be thinking really 3 times, not even twice, before sending their crew and their tanker across without insurance coverage, at least.
India is looking at diversifying. We're in talks with Australia and Canada. What really are the other options for oil importing countries?
I mean, the good news, okay, we are seeing higher prices. That is not something good for a major importing country such as India. But at the same time, before the war started, everybody was expecting a surplus in supply in the market. There were lots of barrels out there,
Right.
and some of them, even from Russia, sanctioned oil, looking for buyers. So I'm not worried about, at the moment, like not enough supplies. And in the worst case scenario, we still have the Strategic Petroleum Reserve from the International Energy Agency that have not been released yet, because again, we are not yet in the worst case scenario. So for India's perspective, especially when it comes to oil, because with gas it's slightly trickier, but with oil, there is oil around where they can diversify their potential supplies from. It does not come cheap. It's coming at a higher bill because of high prices. But even, I think, after a reduction of buying Russian oil, sanctioned oil, because of the threats from the Americans, maybe that could be the last resort of some Indian refineries, just to fill the gap and avoid shortages domestically.
Right, so you're saying this is not the worst case scenario, but if the situation continues to escalate, this soon could spiral into a global energy crisis. Thank you very much, Dr. Carole Nakhle, for joining us on the broadcast with your